3 so-called HOA enforcers surrounded my wife. Then one of them shoved her. What they didn't know. I'm a retired Navy SEAL, trained to neutralize threats and end conflicts with precision. They thought they were in charge. But when they crossed the line onto my property and put hands on my wife, they declared war on the wrong man. And I don't lose wars. It started with a scream. I was in my garage, elbow deep in engine grease, tuning up my motorcycle. It was a calm Saturday morning, the kind where the air smells like pine and the buzz of cicadas plays in the background. Sarah, my wife of 15 years, was out front tending to her garden beds. She had just picked up a tray of tulip bulbs and was deciding where to plant them. Then I heard her cry out. Not a startled yelp. Not a spider in the flowers shriek. It was raw. Scared. I dropped my wrench and bolted for the front yard, heart already pounding. What I saw turned that adrenaline spike into pure rage. 3 men I didn't recognize stood in a semicircle around her. They all wore identical polo shirts with a smug little emblem stitched on the chest, Lakeside HOA Enforcement. One had a phone raised in her face, recording her as she stood frozen, hands clutched to her chest. Another had his arms crossed, barking orders like a drill sergeant with zero authority. The third circled behind her like a hyena looking for a weak spot. I knew these types. Authoritarian wannabes. Guys who never made varsity but still wear Letterman jackets. The kind who get off on enforcing power they don't really have. I stormed up the walkway. Hey! All 3 turned to look at me. But before I could reach them, the guy with the crossed arms shoved my wife. It wasn't just a bump. It was forceful. She stumbled backward into the edge of the garden bed, falling onto her side. Her arm scraped against the concrete border. I saw blood. I lost it. My vision tunneled for a moment. Years of training surged up from muscle memory. But I didn't go physical. Not yet. That's not how I operate. I moved fast and got between them and Sarah. My stance said everything they needed to know. Step away from my wife, I said, voice low and razor sharp. Sir, the lead guy snapped, suddenly putting on a fake calm. This doesn't concern you. Your wife was violating landscaping codes. You assaulted her. That concerns me. The one with the phone kept filming, trying to provoke me. You're being recorded, he said smugly. Good, I snapped. So there's proof of your assault. They shifted uneasily. Bullies don't like resistance. Sarah sat up, shaking, her arm red and scratched. They came out of nowhere, she whispered. They just started yelling. About the color of our flower pots. You didn't file a form for those planters, the third guy added like he was issuing a federal citation. I glared at them. You 3 just made a massive mistake. The one who shoved her shrugged, suddenly less brave. Look man, we were just following HOA protocol. You can file a complaint. I took a photo of each of them. Faces. Name badges. License plates on their golf cart parked half on my lawn. I did it calmly, methodically. You just assaulted a woman on private property, I said flatly. I hope you like courtrooms. For the first time, I saw fear. The fake authority cracked. I turned to Sarah, helped her up, and led her inside. You okay? She nodded slowly, tears brimming but not falling. I was just planting flowers. I held her hand tighter. This wasn't just about planters or flowers. It was about control. These guys were enforcers hired by a power-hungry HOA president who thought fear equaled order. But they had no idea whose house they walked into. And they just declared war on the wrong person. I'm not just some suburban homeowner who keeps the lawn mowed and grills on the weekends. I'm a retired Navy SEAL, trained in tactical defense, crisis response, and situational dominance. I've been dropped behind enemy lines in pitch-black conditions and pulled civilians out of war zones. Handling 3 HOA thugs in golf shirts? That was child's play. As I stood there on my lawn, between my wife and the so-called compliance officers, my stance shifted. Calm. Grounded. But make no mistake, if one of them even flinched in the wrong direction, I was ready to neutralize the situation without laying a finger. Back away from her. Now, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight, the kind that comes from years of giving commands that saved lives. The leader of the group chuckled. Or what? You'll report us to the HOA board? I stared at him. No expression. Just a cold, calculating stillness. I tilted my head slightly and said, "Wrong kind of board, buddy." They didn't get the reference. Not right away. But something about my tone, the way my jaw set, made them hesitate. Then came Karen Delaney. I saw her march up from the sidewalk like a queen surveying her kingdom. Clipboard in hand, chin tilted just enough to show off the rhinestones on her HOA name badge. She was shouting before she even crossed the curb. "This is private community property. Your wife is in violation of Ordinance 6B27 regarding lawn aesthetics and unapproved modifications." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the flower pots?" She scowled. "Unapproved items may be considered blight. We sent a letter last week." "Which we ignored," I replied calmly. "Because it's nonsense." Karen stepped forward, joining her 3 goons. "You don't get to ignore the rules. You agreed when you bought in." I shook my head. "No, I didn't. We're outside your jurisdiction. I've read your bylaws. My lot predates the HOA charter by 6 years. You have no legal authority here." That stopped her for half a second. Her eyes flicked over to one of the men as if to say, "Is that true?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter." Karen snapped, voice rising. "The Aesthetics Committee has full oversight of visible modifications." I took a step forward, chest squared. "You laid hands on my wife. That makes this criminal. You're not in charge here, Karen. You're trespassing. And unless you want a real problem, you and your pretend enforcers better walk away." She didn't move. She was banking on fear. Most people fold when authority knocks on their door, even fake authority. She didn't understand the man standing in front of her. I narrowed my eyes. "You ever heard of Section 9A of your own charter?" She blinked. "What?" "The part that says all enforcement actions must be reviewed and approved in writing by the board and carried out by licensed personnel. Which your team is not." Karen's face went red. The guy with the phone lowered it slightly. "You want to test me on this?" I added. "Because I've got time. And I've got contacts." One of the goons muttered, "Maybe we should go." Karen waved them off. "Fine. But you'll be hearing from our legal team." I smiled. "Great. I'll be expecting them. You'll be hearing from mine too. After I press assault charges." She froze. "Oh yes," I said. "It's already in motion. And I guarantee you, they're a lot scarier than your committee." With that, they backed off, retreating to their golf cart, visibly shaken. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stood on the porch watching them retreat, arms crossed. Sarah leaned into me, still shaken. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Thanks to you." But I knew this was just the opening skirmish. They picked the wrong house. And I was about to show them just how wrong. Karen Delaney wasn't just a neighbor. She was the self-declared queen of the Lakeside HOA, a woman who seemed to have confused suburban governance with full-blown dictatorship. She had appointed herself as HOA president for the 3rd year in a row by running unopposed and quietly amending the election notices to arrive late, or not at all. Karen was the type who reported people for leaving their trash bins out 10 minutes too long and wrote tickets for lawn decorations that weren't on the HOA-approved Pinterest board. I'd heard stories about how she fined a single mom for letting her kid draw chalk art on the sidewalk, or threatened a war vet with a lien for putting up a flagpole without approval. But until now, she had stayed out of my way. Probably because I kept a low profile. Until today. She came marching up with the posture of a battlefield general, clipboard in one hand, an iced coffee in the other, and 3 stooges flanking her like mall cops on a power trip. "The HMA compliance team." "Mr. Walker," she began, not even acknowledging my wife still brushing dirt from her dress, "we've received multiple complaints about unauthorized yard fixtures." Sarah looked stunned. I was planting flowers. Karen didn't even blink. "That birdbath in your front yard wasn't approved. Section 8C of the HMA handbook states," I cut her off. "Your handbook doesn't apply to me. Our property falls outside the HOA's governing boundary. We opted out before buying. You know that." Karen's lips tightened. She hated being corrected, especially in front of her team. The guy with the phone, whose name tag read Don, jumped in. Regardless of boundaries, visible violations affect property values. We're within our rights. I turned my gaze on him. You laid hands on my wife. He looked around nervously. That was an accident. Funny, accidents usually don't come with witnesses, security camera footage, and bruises. Karen tried to redirect. This isn't about her. This is about non-compliance. If you don't remove that yard decor by sunset, we'll issue a citation and begin fines. Citation from who? I asked. You? You have no jurisdiction here. You can't enforce anything. And these three? I motioned toward her hired muscle. They're not licensed. They're not registered with any city or county enforcement agency. They're just three guys in matching shirts you pay with HOA dues to play pretend. The third man, a burly type with Oakleys and a clipboard, suddenly looked unsure. Wait, we're not licensed? Karen hissed, "Shut up, Dave." Sarah, still shaken but steady now, walked up beside me. You came onto our property. You screamed at me. And one of your men pushed me to the ground. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Don't be dramatic. That was it. You need to leave, I said, stepping forward. Now. You've committed trespassing, harassment, and assault. This is no longer an HOA issue, it's a criminal matter. And I guarantee you, I will be pressing charges. Karen paused. You wouldn't dare. I smiled. Watch me. She stood there, teetering between arrogance and fear, then turned on her heel and marched back toward her golf cart. Her team followed, a little less enthusiastically. As they retreated, I looked at Sarah. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes had fire again. That was the last straw. This wasn't a dispute over garden decor. This was intimidation, plain and simple. And they were about to find out what happens when you try to intimidate the wrong man. I didn't lose control. That's not how I'm wired. Years of military discipline taught me how to remain calm under pressure, and this was no exception. But make no mistake, I was angry, and I was going to channel that energy into something far more effective than yelling. First, I made sure Sarah was okay. I cleaned and dressed the scrape on her arm, gave her some water, and let her sit down with Max, our golden retriever, curled at her feet like a bodyguard. Then I got to work. I reviewed the footage from my home security cameras, which had captured the entire confrontation, from the moment the compliance team stepped onto our lawn to the second one of them shoved my wife. It was all there, the yelling, the threats, and the physical assault. I created a digital folder with everything, video footage, close-up screenshots of their faces, photos of their name tags and golf cart license plate, timestamps, and Sarah's written statement. Then I printed out a hard copy of every piece of evidence and placed it in a manila envelope. Within the hour, we were at the county sheriff's office. The deputy at the front desk looked surprised when we walked in. "Can I help you folks?" "Yes," I said. "We're here to file charges." He led us to a private interview room where we sat down with an officer named Deputy Morales. As soon as I laid out the evidence and explained the situation, his expression darkened. "You said this happened on your property?" I nodded. "Our home sits just outside the HOA's jurisdiction. They have no legal right to step onto our land, let alone assault someone." He flipped through the documents and replayed the video footage. "This is clear as day." Sarah, her voice still shaky, said, "I was just gardening. They surrounded me, started yelling. And then he pushed me." Morales leaned back in his chair. "You're not the first person to report issues with this HOA. But this is serious." He assured us the case would be escalated immediately. A formal investigation would be launched against Karen Delaney and her enforcement team. And then came the kicker. Morales recognized one of the men from a prior complaint. A couple in the next neighborhood over had also filed a harassment report, but lacked evidence. This time, they had everything they needed. Before we left, Morales added, "This is going straight to the county prosecutor. We'll be issuing warrants within days." I thanked him, and we walked out feeling a mix of relief and determination. But for me, it wasn't enough. Justice had to go beyond charges. This HOA had created a culture of fear, neighbors too scared to speak up, intimidated by Karen's bogus rules and fake enforcers. That had to end. So I made another call. Not to a lawyer. Not to the media. But to someone who knew exactly how to dismantle an oppressive system. An old teammate of mine, Liam, former Navy SEAL turned legal investigator. Got a situation? He asked. Worse, I said. I've got an HOA running a racket. And they just pushed my wife. There was a pause. Then, send me everything. That night, we put together a plan. Not just to bring justice to Karen and her crew, but to expose the entire operation from the inside out. I wasn't going to let this happen to another family. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about every neighbor who had been bullied, fined, or threatened into silence. And by the time we were done, the HOA wouldn't know what hit them. Turns out, this wasn't their first time causing trouble. I wasn't the first to report them. But I intended to be the last. When I called Liam, I wasn't asking for favors. I was activating a force of nature. We hadn't served in the same platoon for over a decade, but some bonds don't break, and Liam owed me for a thing or two in Fallujah. Within hours, he was in town. We sat down at my kitchen table, laptops open, files spread everywhere. Liam worked as a legal investigator now, and he specialized in exposing fraud, mismanagement, and corruption. Perfect man for the job. He sipped coffee while scrolling through the HOA's public documents. You weren't kidding. These bylaws are a disaster. They've written themselves more power than most city councils. I nodded. And their enforcement arm? Not even licensed. No insurance. No legal training. Just bullies in polos. Liam raised an eyebrow. This is gold. We started digging. Liam filed Freedom of Information Act requests, pulled public financial records, even used satellite imaging to confirm easements and boundary lines. It didn't take long to uncover that Karen had been funneling HOA funds into a community improvement fund, a vague account with zero oversight. What did that fund pay for? You guessed it, her so-called compliance team. No invoices. No contracts. No background checks. Just handshake deals and pocketed cash. Liam chuckled darkly. This isn't just unethical. It's criminal. Embezzlement, impersonation of officials, and unlawful detainment if they ever blocked someone's path. We created a digital dossier. Every violation, every shady transaction, every witness statement we could gather. Sarah helped too, quietly speaking to neighbors, asking if anyone else had been harassed. Turned out, a lot had. One woman, Linda, had been fined $500 for a solar light on her walkway. A veteran next door had been cited for flying an American flag without written permission. A retired teacher had stopped putting up holiday decorations because Karen told her they lowered property value. Liam recorded their stories. With consent. With detail. With dates. In a week, we had a case so airtight it would crush any lawyer they hired. But we didn't stop there. We cross-checked the HOA's articles of incorporation. Karen had made amendments that violated state law. She had appointed herself president for 3 terms without holding a proper election. She had signed off on expenses that never went through a vote. We printed copies of everything. Labeled binders. Created a slideshow. You ready to drop this hammer? Liam asked. I smiled. Let's hit him where it hurts. Their illusion of control. That's when we called the emergency town hall meeting. We didn't just plan to confront Karen, we planned to dismantle the foundation she built. I had the truth, the law, the receipts, and the Navy SEAL in me was ready to see this mission through. They thought they could silence people with citations and golf cart patrols. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't the type to stand down. I was trained to stand up and fight, for what's right. The town hall was held in the community center, a beige brick building that usually hosted bingo nights and garden club meetings. But that night, it was packed. Standing room only. I walked in with Liam right behind me, carrying a wheeled crate full of documents, video evidence, and printed statements from neighbors. Sarah sat in the front row, calm and collected, with Max lying quietly at her feet. Every seat was filled with curious or concerned faces. Some people glanced nervously at Karen, who stood near the podium trying to pretend this was just another routine meeting. I took the microphone. My name is Jack Walker. Some of you know me. Some of you probably don't. But after what happened to my wife, you all need to know the truth about what's going on behind the scenes of your HOA. Karen tried to interrupt. This is not your platform, I raised my voice slightly. You'll get your turn. Right now, I'm talking. I turned on the projector. Slide by slide, video by video, we laid it out, the footage of the assault. The list of neighbors fined for made-up infractions. The illegal hiring of unlicensed enforcers. The shady bookkeeping around the so-called community fund. The evidence of election manipulation. Gasps echoed through the room. Faces turned pale. One elderly man shook his head and muttered, "I knew something was off." Liam stepped forward. For those wondering, everything you're seeing tonight has already been filed with the Sheriff's Department and the County Attorney's Office. Legal action is underway. But what happens next in this community is up to all of you. Karen, visibly sweating now, tried again to take the microphone. This is all fabricated. He's twisting facts. I calmly reached for the remote and hit play on a video. The room fell silent. It was the footage. The exact moment one of her men shoved Sarah. The collective gasp was louder this time. People turned to stare at Karen. I spoke again. This is what happens when someone who thrives on power is left unchecked. When intimidation is normalized. And when silence is mistaken for consent. Someone from the back shouted, "We want a vote." Another added, "Is this why our dues went up?" Karen backed away from the podium like it was burning her fingers. In that moment, it was no longer about me. Or Sarah. Or even Karen. It was about a community finally waking up. And I was there to help them open their eyes. The board called for an emergency vote of no confidence. Karen didn't wait for the results. She stormed out, red-faced, shouting something about lawsuits. No one followed her. By the time the meeting adjourned, over 80% had voted to remove her immediately. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked over at Sarah, who gave me the smallest, proudest nod. Justice was in motion. And we were just getting started. Karen didn't leave quietly. After the town hall meeting was called to order and I began laying out the case against her, she repeatedly tried to derail the presentation. At first, it was subtle, interrupting, scoffing, rolling her eyes. But as the evidence mounted, her composure cracked. "I demand equal time to speak," she shouted. "You'll get your turn," I replied. "After we finish showing what your leadership has done to this community." That's when I played the video. The camera feed from our home system. On screen, everyone saw her compliance team step onto my property without warning, harass my wife, and then shove her to the ground. The room went completely still. A few residents turned visibly angry. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "That's assault." Karen stammered. "This is taken out of context." He edited the video. "No," Liam said as he stepped forward. "This was pulled directly from a time-stamped home surveillance system. It's unaltered. It's been submitted to the Sheriff's Department." Karen started pacing near the side of the stage. "This is a personal vendetta. He's trying to ruin me." A voice from the crowd shouted, "You ruined yourself." I flipped the slide. Next came financial records, showing thousands of dollars misused from HOA dues and funneled into vague categories like special enforcement and beautification stipends, all signed off by Karen. Her voice cracked now. "I was just trying to maintain order." "You abused your position," I said flatly. "You used it to target people, harass them, and enrich yourself. And it ends now." She looked around the room, searching for allies, but found none. Her compliance team was nowhere in sight. Then someone stood. A senior resident named Mr. Gibbons, a Vietnam vet who'd kept mostly to himself. "I served in the Marines," he said, voice low but firm. "You fined me for a flag on my porch. You tried to shame my wife for putting up Christmas lights. I stayed quiet because I didn't want trouble. But now I know I should have spoken sooner. You went too far." The applause started slowly, then grew louder. Karen backed away from the podium like it was poisoned. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. She tried to speak again, but the words wouldn't come. I stepped forward and addressed the board. "If this community wants peace, transparency, and real leadership, it's time for change. That's when the board voted unanimously to suspend Karen's position pending a full legal review. But before they could even finalize the vote, Karen stormed out, slamming the double doors behind her. She was cornered, not by threats or violence, but by truth, evidence, and the community she once ruled through fear. And there was still more justice to come. The fallout came fast. Just days after the town hall explosion, the sheriff's department moved in. Warrants were served to Karen Delaney and her so-called compliance officers. Charges included criminal assault, impersonating law enforcement, and misappropriation of community funds. Karen's home was searched, and her personal devices were seized. The HOA office was locked down and marked as part of an active investigation. News crews picked up the story almost immediately. It wasn't every day that a suburban HOA president got arrested on camera while still clutching her clipboard. The footage of Karen being handcuffed on her own front lawn became the top story on the local news that night. HOA power trip ends in arrest, the banner read. Liam and I watched it from my living room. He smirked. That's what accountability looks like. But this wasn't just about Karen. Her whole system was rotten. Once the prosecutors got involved, they pulled up years of suspicious transactions. Karen had created shell budgets for phantom landscaping projects, threw HOA holiday funds into her own event planning company, and even paid her cousin to repair sidewalks that didn't exist. Turns out the compliance officers weren't just acting out of overzealousness, they were getting paid under the table. Cash, no paper trail. That is, until Liam uncovered Venmo receipts and shady transfers from HOA accounts. The county charged Karen with multiple felony counts, and 2 of her enforcers took plea deals in exchange for testifying. But here's the kicker: once Karen was removed, the entire HOA board was placed under review. Some members resigned on the spot. Others were booted for negligence or complicity. The state HOA Regulatory Council got involved. It became a full-blown case study in what not to do with community power. At the next board meeting, now led by an interim mediator, I was invited to speak. I'm not here to run for anything, I told them. But I'll help you rebuild this right. They offered me a seat on the reformed board. I declined. My days of taking orders were over, and I had no interest in writing bylaws. I just wanted peace for my wife, my neighbors, and myself. Instead, I handed them Liam's binder, now dubbed the Reform Blueprint. It outlined legally enforceable code revisions, how to properly vet and train staff, monthly transparent accounting protocols, resident-led committees with rotation rules. It wasn't just justice anymore. It was healing. And the community responded. People started stepping up. A former teacher volunteered to head the new activities committee. A retired firefighter offered to handle emergency protocols. The neighborhood began to breathe again, like someone had finally opened a window after years of suffocation. Karen's trial date was set for the fall. If convicted, she faced real prison time. But whether she ended up behind bars or not, one thing was clear: her reign was over. And justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with precision, honor, and a dash of Navy SEAL discipline. I looked over at Sarah one evening as the sunset glowed across our porch. She smiled, a real one. For the first time in weeks, she looked at peace. That was all I ever wanted. Not revenge. Resolution. With Karen gone and the old board replaced, the neighborhood began to change. Slowly at first, like a garden recovering from a long drought. Then in waves, vibrant, tangible improvements that you could see and feel. People started walking their dogs again without fear of a violation. Kids rode their bikes without their parents watching anxiously from the porch. Decorations reappeared on porches, flowerbeds bloomed freely, and American flags waved without threat of citation. The new board, made up of residents actually elected by the community, issued a public apology. Not a vague corporate-style sorry for the inconvenience apology, but a real one. They acknowledged the abuses, the intimidation, and the culture of fear that Karen had created. And then they promised change. One of their first acts? Permanently disbanding any form of physical compliance enforcement. No more golf cart patrols. No more badges or fake authority. From now on, any actual disputes would go through proper channels, with transparency, fairness, and respect. They also hired an independent mediator to help rewrite the bylaws, this time with real input from homeowners. There were town halls, surveys, and open forums. And people showed up. They wanted to be involved. To have a voice again. As for Sarah, she began to smile more. She felt safe walking outside, planting her garden, waving to neighbors without wondering if someone would file a report. Her bruises healed, but more importantly, her sense of security returned. She even joined the new neighborhood wellness committee, organizing potlucks and seasonal events to rebuild trust among residents. Liam went back to his city, but not before leaving a final package with the board, a complete handbook on how to maintain ethical governance. He called it the Community Integrity Model. They adopted it unanimously. Our house? It became what it was always meant to be, a place of peace. Max returned to his lazy watchdog routine, sunbathing on the porch while I fixed things in the garage. Sarah and I sat outside in the evenings, sipping sweet tea, watching the sun set over our now quiet street. One afternoon, an elderly neighbor we'd never met before came up to the porch. She brought a basket of cookies and said, "Thank you. We were all too afraid to speak up. You gave us our voice back." That hit me hard. Because in the end, this wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about flexing strength or proving a point. It was about setting things right. About standing up, not just for ourselves, but for those who couldn't or didn't know how. And that's what peace really is. Not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. And finally, peace had returned to Lakeside Estates. They thought I was just another homeowner, just a guy who paid his dues, mowed his lawn, and didn't rock the boat. That illusion worked in my favor. Because when the time came to fight back, they never saw it coming. See, Navy SEALs are trained for more than combat. We're trained to adapt, to assess threats, to strike with precision, and only when necessary. This wasn't Fallujah, but the tactics weren't all that different. Identify the enemy. Understand the terrain. Use leverage, not force, to achieve your objective. Karen and her so-called compliance team had no clue who they were dealing with. They mistook civility for weakness, silence for submission, and they paid the price. But this story isn't just about revenge. It's about justice, the kind that restores a community, heals wounds, and reminds people of their strength. After Karen's arrest, and the full exposure of her corrupt practices, I could have left it there. Packed it up. Disappeared. But I didn't. Because I knew there were still neighbors scared to speak. Elderly couples who'd been shamed. Families who thought they were powerless. So I stayed. Not as a leader, but as a watchman. Someone to make sure what happened to us never happened again. In the weeks that followed, I worked with the interim HOA board to finalize the reform blueprint Liam and I had created. We implemented rotating leadership rules to prevent power hoarding, transparent voting systems, conflict mediation protocols, everything above board. We also held monthly neighborhood meetings, informal ones. People came out with lawn chairs, potluck dishes, and open hearts. We laughed. We listened. We rebuilt. Sarah? She thrived. Her garden turned into a neighborhood attraction. She even taught local kids how to grow vegetables and herbs, turning our front yard into a place of learning instead of fear. And Max? Well, he became the unofficial community mascot, lazing on his porch throne, barking occasionally at squirrels and suspicious squirrels alike. The news eventually moved on to other stories, but I kept getting letters, from other neighborhoods, other states. Veterans who said, "Thanks for standing up." Grandmothers who said, "Now I know what to do." It turns out this wasn't just about one HOA. It was about a pattern, a system, and the courage it takes to break it. That courage doesn't come from shouting or throwing punches. It comes from standing tall, from knowing who you are, from never backing down when someone crosses the line. So to all the Karens out there, to all the fake enforcers with badges they printed themselves, here's my advice: think twice. Because behind that quiet porch, that peaceful lawn, that calm voice, you never know who's standing in the doorway. And sometimes, it's a Navy SEAL. Never underestimate us. We don't start fights. We finish them. They came onto my property thinking they could bark orders and shove my wife around. But they didn't expect a Navy SEAL waiting behind that door. I didn't fight with fists. I fought with facts, law, and discipline, and I took down their entire corrupt system. Now, peace is restored, the bullies are gone, and justice? It's been served with military precision. Collision: never underestimate the quiet man on the porch, especially if he used to wear a trident. Bell. Subscribe for more true stories where the underdog doesn't just survive, he wins.